Hey everybody, welcome to episode 74 of the Askdap show, where we answer your Volkswagen and Audi questions. On this episode, we talk about Mark 7 all-wheel drive swaps and will VW ever enter the tuning market?
Al VW via Facebook says, hey, my one-click window up and down intermittently doesn't work and I have to reset holding the switch up for 10 seconds. I think there's a problem with the switch. Is this happening with anyone else? I've seen a video of somebody having the same problem before.
Hey Al, I've heard about people talking about this with Mark 7 specifically, and anybody who's not familiar with what he's referring to, one-touch feature is when there's an extra detent on most Volkswagen switches where if you pull all the way up or push all the way down, it will roll the window all the way up and roll the window all the way down with one touch. And what people are having a problem with, seems like, is it loses the ability for it to do that one touch up and down. A lot of the reason, a lot of times why it loses that one touch feature is because of what's called pinch protection. And that is the ability for the window motor, which is also the control module, to know the stop point at the top and the bottom of the window, so it knows when it should be stopping for the top and when it should be stopping for the bottom. If pinch protection is not set, you will not have one touch up and down, and so what he's talking about is having to constantly reset the pinch protection. I don't know, because I've never experienced that problem, but I've heard a couple people mention that, which makes me think it's not super uncommon. What I would suggest would be is, if you know that's being a common problem, what most likely a dealer would do in this scenario is, it's going to be hard for them to confirm that, so you would have to leave the car with them for an extended period of time for them to confirm and verify that this weird scenario is happening. So before even going down that road, I would try to do what's called a capacitive discharge, which is you remove the battery cables completely from the vehicle and you hold them together to power down all the modules in the vehicle. Everything will then lose its memory, but then it also gets rid of a lot of problems. A lot of times, if a technician were to call the Volkswagen helpline, they would ask them to do that if there were any weird bugs going on that were not really easily explained. If you do a capacitive discharge and then continue to go through this issue after you reset all your pinch protection and everything, I would say it's probably likely to be a mechanical problem in the switch itself, or potentially a window motor, but that seems pretty unlikely, but possible. And given the fact that Mark 7s haven't been around long enough, that's something that, who knows, that could be a common problem in the future. But that's the path that I would suggest going down to determine if you have a problem or not, and hopefully that helps you solve your problem.
Chris Martin via Facebook says, has anyone done an all-wheel drive swap on a Mark 7 yet?
Okay, Chris, all-wheel drive swaps on a Mark 7. So, all-wheel drive swaps have been a thing for quite a while that obviously people always want to do because it's really cool and interesting and whatever. Really depends on the car you're doing it on, whether it even makes any sense at all. Most cars now are available in all-wheel drive because the All-Track is now out, as well as the Golf R. Swapping all-wheel drive is a really expensive proposition. I reached out to a good friend of mine who owns Eurowise. If you're not familiar, they're a European shop. They do everything from high-end stuff to Mark 1 swaps, and they're kind of known for VR6 Mark 1 swaps because they make kits for that. But they do a lot of custom fab work and custom jobs like this. And so I reached out to him just to say, okay, give me an idea roughly of what it would cost to do that. And he said roughly, labor-wise, if you bring him a car to transfer, let's say you bought a wrecked Golf R and brought him stuff to transfer all the stuff from, you're looking at about $5,000 in fabrication labor. So that's a pretty expensive endeavor as a general rule, and you have to be pretty committed to want to do that, because that's not even buying all the parts to swap, and that doesn't even include potentially other things you're going to need to do that. So you're probably going to need to buy a floor pan, because I did look, and the Golf R all-wheel drive floor pan is different than the GTI one, so you would have to have them cut out your floor pan, weld in a new one, and all that jazz. So again, it's a really expensive proposition. I think most people in these scenarios are almost never ever going to do that, because those cars, buying a wrecked Mark 7 Golf R is probably not very easily attainable for one that, if it's been smashed in the front, maybe you could find one. And that would be a route to go down. But oftentimes, if you're looking at swapping from, let's say, a Golf 1.8T to a Golf R, you're probably just better off go trade in your 1.8T Golf and go buy a Golf R and save yourself a lot of potential headaches. The other variable to this that I think is something that needs to be talked about is, if you're not doing this job yourself, or even if you are doing your job yourself, finding the people who are capable of doing swaps like this is probably a lot easier said than done. Eurowise, I know they do a ton of fab work. They're very experienced with that kind of job. Bringing that to just any shop to try to do, to me, seems like an absolute nightmare, that you're very likely to end up in a situation where people get halfway through a job and may not be capable of completing it properly, especially if you go down the road of, even if they get the mechanical stuff done, but the rest of it, they can't figure out the logistics of how to make it all work together, which can oftentimes potentially include ABS modules and different coding and stuff like that. So although drive swaps sound cool, but oftentimes are very impractical, so you have to be super committed to want to do something like that.
Jenna via shopdap.com says, I have an 06 Passat 2.0T that I purchased off an individual. I got my oil changed at Walmart and drove it for a few weeks, and my oil light came on and said stop, turn off engine immediately. I did so and turned it back on, the light was off, and I drove it again. A couple days later, the light came back on and my car completely shut off on me. I had to get it towed to my house because it won't start. What could be the problem? I have 2 young children under the age of 2 years and need to fix my car. Please help.
Okay, Jenna, it sounds like possibly really bad news for you. Most likely, either one of two things happening: either they changed your oil and possibly left a drain plug loose, and so oil leaked out and caused it to lose oil pressure. But more than likely, what it sounds like is, because you would have seen massive, pretty significant oil leaks if that was the case, more than likely what happened is that vehicle that you purchased had a bad oil pump. They may have gotten rid of it because it had a bad oil pump. Who knows? It may have gone bad after you got it. Hard to say for sure. But an oil light always means that you have a problem. You should never ever drive a car with an oil light, even if it's just sporadic. You should always address it immediately, because unfortunately what it sounds like happened is you probably have locked up the engine, which is terrible news, and hopefully that's not the case. But my advice would be, bring it to somebody who can help you diagnose it, a shop who is experienced with VW, Audi, or a dealer. One or the other. They can do an oil pressure test and determine if they do have an oil pressure issue, or if something else is going on and that's why you have your no start issue. If your no start issue is related to the oil issue, it's almost certainly you need an engine, so that would be obviously really bad news as well. The other part of the thing that makes me think somebody may have had a pre-existing issue is the fact that oil pumps on FSI engines are the complete balance shaft assembly, and they are very expensive. They're about $1,300 for the oil pump balance shaft assembly all as one unit, which would be cause for somebody to probably try to get rid of a car that they didn't want to pay for an oil pump. So hopefully that's not the case, but that would be my advice. And unfortunately, and I'm sure this doesn't help Jenna, but this is a testament as to why it's super, super important. If you have an oil light ever for any amount of time, you should immediately stop your car. Do not continue to drive it until you've determined if you actually have a problem or not, and then go from there, because failing to do so can result in really bad problems. So hopefully, Jenna, hopefully it's not any of those things and I'm wrong, and maybe you were just a little bit low on oil and you have a different reason why you have a no start problem, but unfortunately that would be my best guess as to what's going on.
Stephen Voorhees via Facebook says, do you think VW will ever enter the tuning game in a similar way that Ford has?
Okay, will VW ever enter the tuning market? This question was actually asked on a Facebook Live I did a couple weeks ago now, and at the time I actually said no, because I had heard actually in the past, and it's something I don't think I've ever discussed before, I have heard from people, whispers from people in VW, that historically they have seen tunes made by VW, but they would never enter the US market or never enter the accessory market for a lot of complicated reasons, because the way VW kind of views accessories and modifying cars, that's kind of a German thing, and they're, the way they just view accessories in general and modifying anything, a way things is built the way they should be, and that's kind of the black and white view they have on this stuff. Now I've heard recently that there is a possibility, and this is just, again, through the grapevine, I've heard some things that say that there's a possibility that they may be looking into something. My guess would be, if VW ever did, and keep in mind this is pure speculation, I've just heard through the grapevine that they may be considering something. Whether that actually happens or not, who knows. But if they ever did, it would probably be a much more watered down version than what the general aftermarket is used to. Let's say for example on the Mark 7, they get roughly 100 horsepower from Stage 1 Plus tunes, Stage 1 Plus from Unitronic, or whatever, Stage 1 from the other tuners. The Volkswagen tune would probably be more expensive and would probably be 30 or 40 horsepower instead of 100, but you would still be able to keep your warranty, or you'd maybe, who knows, maybe Volkswagen would sell it, and then if you wanted to keep your warranty, you'd have to pay an additional amount. Tough to say for sure. It's really pure speculation, but my guess is they would probably pre-package the tune with a warranty and probably just make it much more expensive, where it would be, let's say, you could get 50 horsepower, 40 horsepower, 30 horsepower, but it would cost you $1,000 as opposed to $600 or $700. So that's something that's a possibility that could be in the future. I know a lot of other manufacturers have been way more receptive to this type of stuff. Ford, as you mentioned, being one of them. Also, Dodge back in the day with the SRT4 Neon was really gung-ho about tuning. They had turbo upgrades that were from the factory, which they were pretty significant amounts of power back in the day that for really reasonable prices. I want to say SRT4s had a turbo upgrade that was like $3,000 and gave them 150 horsepower to an SRT4, which, if you recall at the time, SRT4s were really fast cars for the time. So I'm not sure VW would ever be that aggressive as those other American-made cars would be, but who knows? Only time's going to tell before we know if for sure one way or the other if VW is going to go down the tuning route or not. My guess would be is they would introduce it with a new model, but that's just a theory. But either way, I think that there's going to be people who are going to go one way or the other still. I think that because the performance is not going to be as significant as the aftermarket, there will be people who will still go down the road of power. And then because of obviously the safety and security of the warranty situation, it would be a lot of people who go down the road of factory tuning. So, one way or the other, whether they do it or not, I think that there's always options for people. And, I'm curious, actually, if in the comments below, let me know whether you would go with, if you had the option on a newer vehicle, would you go down the road of factory tuning for less power or aftermarket tuning for more power? Thank you so much for watching episode 74 of the Askdap Show, where we answer your Volkswagen and Audi questions. If you have any questions or comments about the questions answered in this show, be sure to leave in the comments below. If you like this video, be sure to give it a thumbs up and subscribe for more like it.